Daniel Carter had learned how to disappear without actually leaving the room. At 38, he worked as a compliance assistant in a mid-sized corporate firm based in London with branches in New York. His job was simple but essential, double-checking reports, ensuring policies were followed, and quietly fixing mistakes others made. Yet no one ever thanked him. In meetings, Daniel sat at the far end of the table. When he spoke, voices talked over him. When he sent emails pointing out errors, his manager, Oliver Grant, would reply curtly, "Noted." No credit, no acknowledgement. The worst was HR business partner Melissa Rhodes. Melissa was sharp, confident, and deeply political. She believed power came from proximity to senior leadership, not fairness. Whenever Daniel raised concerns about unethical practices, bullying, or inaccurate reporting, Melissa smiled politely and said, "Daniel, you need to be more of a team player." Team player. That phrase followed him like a shadow. One Friday afternoon, during an open-floor meeting, Oliver laughed loudly and said, "Let's not overcomplicate things like Daniel usually does." Laughter echoed. Daniel forced a smile, his face burning. Later that day, Melissa called him into a glass-walled HR room. "Your attitude is becoming a problem," she said calmly. "You make people uncomfortable." Daniel nodded silently. Years ago, he would have defended himself. Now he just listened. That evening, he stayed late, correcting a financial compliance document that, if submitted incorrectly, could cost the company millions. He fixed it, quietly, as always. No one knew that Daniel wasn't just an assistant, and no one suspected that the coming Monday would change everything. If you enjoy deep, emotional workplace stories with powerful twists, make sure to like this video and subscribe now, because what happens next will shock you. Monday morning arrived with tension in the air. The company was preparing for a regional audit, and stress levels were high. During a large departmental briefing, Oliver suddenly projected a spreadsheet onto the screen. "This," he said sharply, "is why deadlines matter." Everyone turned to see Daniel's name highlighted. Oliver continued, "Some people here clearly don't understand pressure." Daniel froze. The spreadsheet wasn't even his responsibility. Melissa stood beside Oliver, arms crossed. She didn't intervene, she didn't clarify, she simply watched. Whispers filled the room. Daniel felt smaller than ever. After the meeting, colleagues avoided eye contact. A junior analyst muttered, "Tough luck, mate," as if Daniel had actually failed. Inside, something shifted. Not anger, not shame, resolve. That night, Daniel opened a private folder on his laptop, one he had been quietly building for 3 years. Inside were documented violations, emails, falsified records, HR negligence reports, everything. He hadn't collected them out of revenge. He had collected them because someone needed to. The HR mask slips. Melissa Rhodes called Daniel into her office late in the afternoon, just as most employees were packing up to leave. The glass walls gave the illusion of transparency, but inside, the atmosphere felt heavy and closed. Melissa gestured toward the chair across from her desk, her expression carefully neutral. "This pattern can't continue," she said, her voice noticeably colder than before. "There have been ongoing concerns about your performance and how you interact with the team. At this point, we're considering placing you on a performance improvement plan." For a moment, Daniel said nothing. He studied her face, the polite HR smile now stripped of warmth, replaced by quiet authority. Then, slowly, he looked up. "Based on what evidence?" he asked calmly. The question caught her off guard. Melissa blinked, just once, but it was enough. She wasn't used to being challenged, especially not by someone she had already mentally categorized as weak and replaceable. She leaned back in her chair, folding her arms. "In roles like yours, perception matters," she replied. "And unfortunately, perception isn't in your favor. Several managers feel you're difficult, too rigid, not aligned with the culture." Daniel listened carefully. He didn't interrupt. He didn't defend himself. Years in the background had taught him the value of silence. Still, something in his expression changed, not defiance, but clarity. "So this isn't about missed deadlines," he said, "or incorrect work." Melissa's lips tightened. "This is about fit," she said sharply, "and fit is something HR takes very seriously." Daniel nodded slowly. Understood, he replied. Melissa relaxed slightly, mistaking his calm for submission. She slid a printed document across the desk. Take the weekend to review this. We'll discuss next steps on Monday. Daniel stood, thanked her politely, and left the room without another word. What Melissa didn't know, what no one in that office knew, was that Daniel had already taken steps weeks earlier. Late nights, careful documentation, and a secure anonymous message sent directly to corporate compliance in New York. He had attached evidence, clear timelines, names, decisions HR had buried. And 2 days ago, he had received a reply. Thank you for bringing this to our attention. We are initiating a formal review. As Daniel returned to his desk, he felt no fear. The audit day. The audit team arrived earlier than expected, just after 9 in the morning. There was no prior announcement, no polite warning email, only a sudden wave of unfamiliar faces stepping onto the office floor with laptops, folders, and quiet authority. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Keyboards fell silent. External consultants led the group, followed closely by legal advisors in dark suits. Their presence alone was enough to unsettle the room. Audits were never comfortable, but this felt different, heavier, more deliberate. Then the reception email circulated. A visitor list. Names scrolled across screens until one line froze several managers in place. Jonathan Reeves, Group CEO. A ripple of unease moved through the department. This wasn't routine oversight. This was escalation. Oliver Grant immediately stood up from his desk and adjusted his tie, smoothing his jacket as if appearance alone could restore control. His voice grew louder, more confident, as he issued unnecessary instructions to no one in particular. Across the floor, Melissa Rhodes transformed instantly. Her sharp edges softened, her smile widened. She greeted the auditors with exaggerated professionalism, offering coffee, water, assistance, anything to appear cooperative and in charge. People who had ignored Daniel for years suddenly avoided his desk altogether. Daniel noticed everything. And yet, he did nothing differently. He remained seated, focused on his screen, reviewing compliance logs with steady precision. No nervous glances, no whispered questions, just quiet work as always. If anything, his calm stood out more than panic ever could. As the audit team spread across departments requesting documents and access, tension thickened the air. Emails flew. Managers whispered behind glass walls. HR phones rang non-stop. Daniel simply saved his file, labeled clearly, and waited. He had long understood something others were only beginning to realize that morning. When truth arrives, it doesn't rush. It walks in early, and it never announces itself. The audit review meeting was already tense when Jonathan Reeves leaned forward in his chair. The large conference room was filled with senior managers, auditors, legal consultants, and HR representatives. A massive screen displayed rows of compliance data, corrected figures, revised timelines, and updated risk assessments. Jonathan's eyes narrowed slightly as he studied the document. Then he paused. Who verified these compliance corrections? He asked, his voice calm but unmistakably firm. No one spoke. Oliver Grant glanced toward Melissa. Melissa avoided his eyes, flipping through her notes as if the answer might appear on the page. The auditors waited. The silence stretched, thick and uncomfortable. Slowly, almost reluctantly, Daniel raised his hand. Every head in the room turned. Jonathan looked at him with interest, not judgment. He studied Daniel's posture, his calm expression, the absence of nervous energy that filled everyone else in the room. You've been fixing these for years, haven't you? Jonathan asked. Daniel nodded once. Yes, he said quietly. A few murmurs passed through the room. Jonathan turned back to the screen, scrolling through historical data. The timestamps told their own story. Late nights, repeated revisions, consistent accuracy. And yet, Jonathan continued, now looking directly at Daniel again, you're listed internally as a low-impact employee. The temperature in the room seemed to drop instantly. Oliver stiffened. Melissa's fingers tightened around her pen. Jonathan leaned back, his expression unreadable. "That's interesting," he said. He turned toward the auditors. These corrections prevented regulatory breaches, significant ones. Then, toward HR, how does someone responsible for this level of risk mitigation end up categorized as low value? No one answered. Daniel lowered his hand, returning to stillness. He didn't smile, he didn't react. But in that moment, the story everyone believed about him quietly collapsed. And the truth, documented, undeniable, finally had the floor. Truth exposed. Jonathan Reeves slowly turned his chair toward Melissa Rhodes. The shift was subtle, but everyone in the room felt it. His calm expression hardened, not with anger, but with precision. "Why were repeated complaints dismissed?" he asked. Melissa opened her mouth to respond, then stopped. Her confidence, so effortless only days ago, faltered under the weight of the question. She cleared her throat. "There were no formal findings," she said, her voice uneven. "We followed standard HR procedures." Jonathan raised a hand. "Let's review that," he said quietly. One of the legal consultants connected a laptop to the screen. The first email appeared, dated 3 years earlier, then another, and another. Each one documented concerns Daniel had raised, compliance risks, management pressure to overlook errors, internal bullying, and HR inaction. The room remained silent as the evidence unfolded. Reports followed, time-stamped files, audit trails, HR responses that ended conversations without resolution. Phrases repeated themselves. No further action required. Perception issue. Closed. Jonathan leaned forward. "These were not isolated concerns," he said. "They were patterns." Melissa's hands trembled slightly as she adjusted her papers. "We had to balance priorities," she said weakly. "Not every complaint can be escalated." Jonathan's gaze shifted briefly toward Oliver Grant. Oliver's face had gone pale. The confident manager who once laughed during meetings now sat rigid, eyes fixed on the table. A single drop of sweat traced down his temple as more documents appeared, approvals bearing his name, decisions made under his authority. Jonathan exhaled slowly. "What I see here," he said, "is not poor performance. It's suppressed accountability." He turned back to Melissa. "HR exists to protect the company by protecting integrity, not to manage inconvenience." No one spoke, because in that moment, the truth wasn't being argued, it was being proven. Consequences. By Friday, the office felt different. The tension that had hung in the air like a thick fog was gone, replaced by a quiet sense of accountability. The events of the audit week had left no room for denials, excuses, or shortcuts. Everyone knew that things had changed permanently. Oliver Grant, who had once strutted through corridors with a self-assured arrogance, was formally terminated. His office had been cleared within hours, boxes packed neatly, as if the company were trying to erase the past as quickly as possible. Colleagues who had feared his temper now walked freely, sharing whispers and relieved glances. Rumors circulated. Finally, the manager who humiliated employees and silenced concerns had faced the consequences of his actions. Melissa Rhodes, the HR business partner who had skillfully maintained the office's image of professionalism while dismissing legitimate complaints, was placed under investigation. Her impeccable posture and carefully practiced smile no longer held power. Policies she had ignored or manipulated were now being reviewed, rewritten, and enforced. The same HR room that had once been a place of subtle intimidation now felt sterile, neutral, and accountable. Her role in the systemic issues was being scrutinized at every level, a reminder that influence without ethics is fragile. And then there was Daniel Carter. Quiet, meticulous, and often overlooked, he had watched the chaos unfold with measured patience. The company recognized his integrity, his dedication, and the silent work he had performed for years. By the end of the week, he was offered a new role, head of internal ethics and compliance. It was more than a promotion. It was a statement. The company's values were shifting, and Daniel would now lead that change. He accepted quietly, without fanfare, without gloating. No celebration, no triumphal speech. Just a deep, steady sense that right had prevailed. His colleagues, once dismissive, now looked at him with respect. The office understood something fundamental. Patience, integrity, and diligence cannot be ignored forever. And Daniel? He returned to his desk, ready to ensure that the system would never fail in silence again. Months later, Daniel Carter walked down the same office corridor he had once navigated quietly, unnoticed and often dismissed. The fluorescent lights reflected off the polished floors, and the familiar hum of keyboards filled the air. Everything looked the same desks, the same chairs, the same glass walled offices, but the atmosphere was different. The difference wasn't in the furniture or layout, it was in the way people looked at him now.
This is
Colleagues
completely
who had once
unacceptable.
whispered
How
about
could this
his
happen?
supposed
We need to address this
inadequacies
immediately
now greeted
before it
him with
escalates.
nods of respect. The junior analysts who had avoided eye contact during team meetings smiled and even asked for advice. Managers who had once laughed at his caution now deferred to his judgment. Daniel's presence carried weight, not because he had shouted, demanded attention, or fought for recognition, but because he had waited, quietly letting the truth reveal itself. He paused for a moment outside his new office, head of internal ethics and compliance, and reflected. Months of silence, of documentation, of patience had led to this point. Integrity doesn't need a loud voice. It doesn't rely on theatrics or drama. It only needs time, persistence, and an unwavering commitment to doing what is right. That quiet diligence had shifted power, reshaped respect, and corrected systemic failures. As Daniel moved into his office, he felt a calm sense of
Time to step back and see the bigger picture.
edge.
The
He knew
view
deeply
always provides
that the system
clarity.
had corrected itself, and he had simply
Time to
paused
step back
long
and see
enough
the
to
bigger
listen
picture.
louder.
The view always provides clarity.
And now, as the story comes to an end, we ask you, the viewer, if this story inspired you, reminded you of your own workplace struggles, or gave you hope for the value of patience and integrity, please like this video and subscribe to our channel. Stories like Daniel's matter, and your support allows us to continue sharing real, powerful tales of courage, ethics, and perseverance. Don't let this lesson fade. Be part of a community that values truth and resilience.